mode.
Hello everyone, good morning and thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Mike Wallabin and I'm the president of 4G360.com. I'll be hosting today's webinar on how to avoid pitfalls when migrating to an LTE network. 4G360 is one of the largest online communities for 4G professionals. We provide a wide variety of content, training, and resources that help 4G professionals with their job, career, and professional development. I am pleased to be joined on this webinar with today's presenter, Angel Young. Angel has served as Marketing Programs Manager at Alepo since 2012. Prior to joining Alepo, Angel worked in international private equity and investment banking in Singapore, London, Hong Kong, and Houston. In addition, we'll have Ramiro Costa on the line, Director of Key Accounts with Alepo. Ramiro has more than 12 years experience and he'll help with some of the questions we may have during the webinar. Alepo is a leading provider of IT and network software solutions for telecommunication companies, enabling them to compete aggressively across technologies and multiple generations. Alepo's solutions reach millions of global subscribers spanning technologies that include LTE, 3 and 4G, DSL, Wi-Fi, and quad play through market-leading customers on 5 continents. Within the LTE space, Alepo's deep expertise has allowed it to achieve successful deployments of its LTE control plane solution, enabling its customers to create a best-of-breed LTE network. They are true experts in helping companies migrate from WiMAX-based networks to LTE. We will have Q&A during and after the presentation. We will also conduct a brief poll and encourage all attendees to participate. To ask questions during the webinar, please use the GoToWebinar dashboard that should be on the right side of the screen. Also, this webinar is being recorded, and a follow-up email with a link to the recording will be sent to all attendees. So let's go ahead and get started with the presentation. I'll hand this over to our presenter, Angel Young. Angel?
Thank you, Mike, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining us here today. We are excited to be here to share with you some of our experience and expertise in LTE. On today's webinar, we're going to focus on the topic of how to achieve a smooth LTE rollout. We're going to discuss best practices for a smooth LTE deployment, core network components and integration. We're going to talk about real-time policy and charging control. And lastly, we will look at an LTE case study and end with a Q&A session. Before we get started, I'd like to call your attention to the left-hand column of this slide. There you can find my contact information listed, as well as Alepo's website, where you can find more resources and information on today's topic. And if you are Twitter savvy, you can submit any questions, comments, or feedback using the hashtag LTE rollout or mentioning @AlepoUSA in your tweet. Also, I just wanted to announce that we will be showcasing our LTE solution with Airspan next month in London, and you can find out more information on that on our website. I'd like to start off with some industry trends that we have observed. Mobile broadband, which encompasses networks, devices, and applications, is becoming one of the most successful and fastest growing industries of all time. The rich capabilities and ease of access of new mobile platforms, such as smartphones, tablets, and the up-and-coming wearables industry, is enabling users to consume more and more data through streaming, social networking, and cloud-based synchronization, just to name a few of the methods. And as a result, there is a steady global demand for faster and more diversified mobile broadband services. Also, increasing competition is driving operators to launch new services to achieve differentiation. We are seeing that operators view new IP-based services as main drivers of revenue and increased ARPU. WiMAX, although it is still a widely prevalent technology, is losing both momentum and consumer device support, with main vendors such as Qualcomm and Intel shifting R&D investment to LTE. Another trend that's worth mentioning is that the TD LTE device ecosystem is expected to increase significantly this year as networks are launched in China, India, and the US. And if you combine the subscriber base of China Mobile, Airtel, SoftBank, and Sprint, Nextel, Clearwire, you get over 1 billion existing mobile subscribers combined. And this large base, along with network build-out commitments, have chipset manufacturers pushing focus to TD-LTE support. These trends are confirmed by industry reports like the Cisco Visual Networking Index, which shows users' demand for data has grown significantly, with the amount of users generating over 2 gigabytes per month now representing 18% of the total users. And this is more than 3 times what it was the year before. As a result, operators are looking at new strategies to cope with this exponential growth in data demand, and tiered pricing has proven to be a really effective method of constraining data consumption on mobile users at the top of the pyramid. And for this reason, tiered plans are on the rise and went from 4% to a whopping 55% of all plans in the last 3 years, as the Cisco report shows. First, a little background. The next few slides are geared towards existing WiMAX operators that are considering migrating to LTE, but subsequent slides will have a broader focus that will be relevant to both WiMAX and non-WiMAX operators alike. So we can divide the broadband wireless market into 2 main groups of operators. There is the established mobile operators on one side, and the new entrants on the other side, which are comprised mainly of greenfield and other fixed-line operators. WiMAX technology was designed and targeted mainly for these greenfield operators, basically as a disruption to the established reign of the mobile operators. It was developed as a standalone standard, and it carries no legacy, so it does not require backwards compatibility. On the other hand, LTE was developed with an emphasis on backwards compatibility to previous generations of cellular technology, and it was developed by mobile operators and their vendors. LTE comes in 2 types. The first type of LTE that was developed was FD-LTE, which stands for Frequency Division Duplex LTE, and this is suitable for mobile operators that have available FDD spectrum. TD-LTE is accessible to a much broader range of service providers that don't have access to an FD spectrum, so this includes WiMAX operators. Now that we have some context, I'm going to talk about the challenges associated with a LTE rollout. In the first category of challenges, I'm going to talk about are related to your customers. One of the main challenges involved in the process is device conversion, both in terms of logistics and the associated costs. A shift to LTE is, for the most part, driven by the large market opportunity, and generally this will justify the cost of device conversion for the provider. With regards to logistics, rolling out the device conversion requires intensive planning, especially if you are transitioning from another technology that LTE is going to ultimately replace. You need to make sure that proper devices that connect to both networks are widely available until customers are able to completely transition to LTE devices. Another key challenge is considering what to do with your existing customers. So these customers, they have made an investment, they've bought a device, signed a contract, and they are not going to be happy if their device no longer works on the network. You also need to think about how to retain and grow your customer base while transitioning. It's quite challenging to convince customers to join your network if they know you're going to be switching to LTE soon. And current customers will worry about how they will fare during the transition. Are they going to be disrupted during the transition, or are they going to have to purchase all new devices? In the next category of challenges, we're going to talk about challenges related to the radio access network. So how will you add an LTE radio interface to existing base stations? Vendors like to claim that adding LTE support to existing base stations currently in use involves only a simple software upgrade. Unfortunately, in reality, this is not always true, and in some situations, the process may also involve a hardware upgrade in order to accommodate for the higher processing power. Another key consideration is network coexistence, and here we have two possible alternatives, overlay or swap. And to explain these two alternatives, let's take WiMAX to LTE migration as an example. In the long term, most WiMAX operators that deploy LTE are likely to aim for a complete swap to LTE over time, mainly because the cost and complexity involved in operating both networks is just not feasible in the long run. But in the short to the medium term, operators may decide to build an overlay LTE network that coexists with their WiMAX network. And this allows for a smooth transition for subscribers who can continue to use their WiMAX devices, while new subscribers have the option of choosing WiMAX or LTE. And there are benefits and drawbacks associated with both methods. Although overlay is the most common option for those with an existing non-3GPP network, only operators with enough spectrum can afford an overlay network. On the other hand, a swap requires more intensive planning to ensure that all subscriber devices can support the proper interface and will successfully switch to the new network as it is turned on. The most well-known example of this is Yoda in Russia, who turned on its first big city LTE network through an overnight swap. Another strategy is to deploy LTE in geographic areas where there is currently no WiMAX coverage. For example, if you plan on migrating to LTE and want to expand to a new region, you might as well light up the new cities with LTE. However, ultimately, a swap or overlay would be needed for a complete migration of all customers to LTE. There are a lot of different factors to think about when deciding which migration method you want to employ. There is not one right answer, since every service provider's situation is different, and often you will have to employ multiple methods. Some things to consider are your RF planning, the types of devices your subscribers are holding, as well as factor in what you've already invested in your current network and if any of these can be used to support LTE. In Yoda's situation, for example, they required half of their WiMAX band to operate its LTE network, so it was essentially impossible to run the network simultaneously and have a gradual transition. Another major challenge in any LTE rollout is that of core network evolution. And when talking about core network evolution, a number of key questions immediately arise that need to be addressed. These include thinking about new core equipment requirements, as well as thinking about user and control plane interfaces and protocols that need to be supported. Also important is evaluating whether the existing network elements can be upgraded to support the migration, and if they can be integrated with new and existing components post-upgrade, and this is specific to each vendor. When thinking about core network evolution, the fundamental goal here is to follow industry best practices that would guarantee a seamless migration for your customers with no interruption or disturbance of their existing services. And now I'm going to hand it over to Mike, who will conduct a poll.
Thanks, Angel. All right, let's go ahead and do a quick poll. What I'll do is I'll launch the poll, and you should see a window pop up on your screen. And on that, you'll see the question is, one second here. There you go. At what stage of LTE migration is your company at? And what the answers are already deployed, will deploy in the next 12 months, currently evaluating, and no plans to deploy. So I'd like to give everyone 10 or 15 seconds here to do this quick poll. We will be sharing the poll results later in the presentation. Okay, we'll go ahead and close this out. Thanks.
Now that we have discussed some of the key aspects and challenges involved in an LTE rollout, let's take a look at some of the main drivers for a transition to LTE. One of the main drivers is access to a larger market compared to other competing technologies such as WiMAX. LTE benefits from more vendors and a larger device ecosystem. Already there are a number of LTE devices already commercially available, and the number and variety of the gadgets is growing on a daily basis. WiMAX devices, on the other hand, are fewer and dwindling. Also, we've seen how key vendors, such as Qualcomm and Intel, for example, have committed to support multi-band LTE devices that are compatible with both TD and FD frequencies. And the pricing on these devices are expected to decrease significantly in the coming months. TD spectrum availability is also playing a central role in the growth of LTE. Industry reports show that TDD spectrum has a cost advantage to FD, and it is more readily available. So now that a tipping point has been reached with regards to TD device availability, the use of TD spectrum has made LTE migration much more accessible, especially for those migrating from WiMAX, since TD LTE operates on TDD unpaired spectrum just like WiMAX. So WiMAX operators have the option of using existing spectrum for LTE. As we've already mentioned on a previous slide, the availability of RAN agnostic base stations that support multiple wireless interfaces with support for LTE interface available through a software upgrade in some cases makes for a relatively easier migration. The business case for LTE is quite compelling, and especially in terms of the new revenue streams that LTE opens up to providers. One such opportunity is through introducing voice services alongside data. Wireless data consumption gets a lot of attention, but voice still contributes most revenue of a service provider. In the United States, for example, statistics show that voice still represents 55% of industry revenues. .4G Americas is reporting 205 networks and 126 million LTE connections at the end of August 2013. And these initial deployments have grown faster than any wireless technology that has previously been deployed. So as more and more LTE networks go live, there's an opportunity to generate new revenue streams from LTE roaming. Next, we're going to look at the BSS OSS requirements of a smooth LTE migration. Alepo's roots are in the BSS OSS space, so we are very familiar with the challenges that operators have faced when migrating and expanding to a new network. And we have listed here best practices for a back office system that will support a smooth transition to LTE. On the top of the list, we have integrated vendor-neutral environment, which allows you to create a best-of-breed network at a competitive cost. And we will go further into why we think vendor neutrality is the most important practice later on. Integration and interoperability between the existing network elements and back-office systems and the LTE domain is also crucial. Proper integration facilitates a seamless and a cost-effective integration and is essential for optimizing your network. Also important is the ability of your BSS OSS to be highly flexible. It needs to be flexible in order to quickly launch new products and services. And this capability is especially important in a competitive and a fast-moving market environment such as ours. Your vendor should provide support for end-to-end business processes in order to reduce time to market and prevent any lags in service that might cause customer dissatisfaction. And lastly, scalability is very important to support subscriber base growth in a cost-efficient manner. I'm going to talk briefly about the Evolve Packet Core components, also known as the LTE Core. The EPC is comprised of these elements shown. I'm not going to go into too much detail on each one, but on the control plane is the convergent charging and billing platform. The PCRF is the function allows you to enjoy innovative business models and granular policy. The HSS is where subscriber information is stored. Diameter signaling controller streamlines signaling in your network and between networks for roaming scenarios. The PDN gateway manages the IP flow between the user device and the LTE core, and this also acts as the policy enforcement point. On the network, there is also the MME, which handles the mobility and security functions. And lastly, we have the Evolve Node B, which is the LTE base station. One of the main features of the EPC is that it provides a new core network that supports LTE, as well as interoperability with legacy GSM or non-3GPP based networks. And on this slide, we see a general EPC network architecture that demonstrates how this integration is accomplished. The boxes in red represent the components of Alepo's LTE control plane solution, and the various networks are represented by the clouds on the bottom of the illustration. It's important to point out, especially to WiMAX operators, that in this architecture, the AAA server plays an important role by supporting both radius and diameter stacks. Something else I wanted to point out is the ANDSF entity, which stands for Access Network Discovery and Selection function. Its purpose is to allow the operator to dictate how user devices prioritize and access between different technologies when there is more than one non-3GPP network available. As I briefly mentioned before, vendor diversity and vendor neutrality are the most critical success factors for LTE deployments. At a minimum, the EPC control plane elements should come from a vendor that is different from the data plane and radio vendor, and I will tell you why. There are a number of benefits of working with different LTE vendors for different components as opposed to purchasing a bundled or a single black box system from one vendor. First of all, vendor diversity allows you to avoid being locked in by a single vendor. Vendor lock-in is the most expensive initial deployment mistake in the long run. And not only does the operator lose competitive leverage once the initial deployment has been completed, but there is no guarantee that the operator will be able to expand with other vendors in the future as your needs and your priorities change. Vendor neutrality and standards compliance are essential to building best-of-breed networks. And using this strategy, the operator is able to select the best vendor for each component by comparing features at a component level. For example, best-of-breed PCRF allows the service provider to support advanced plans and promotion requirements as dictated by business and marketing decisions, whereas a bundled PCRF usually only offers basic functionality and it might require extensive customizations down the road. It is also easier to manage costs and compare proposals once there's a cost breakdown at the component level. Even bundled solutions can be broken down per component if the operator insists or gets the point across that lock-in through bundling is not an option they will pursue. And I'll expand more on in a following slide. But a standards-based integration framework with a flexible and high-performing interface is a key factor to reduce the risk of integration, which will future-proof your deployment. Alepo sees vendor neutrality as a key solution feature, and that's why we work closely with other vendors in the LTE ecosystem and participate in industry-wide IoT events such as the Voice over LTE event hosted by the Multi-Service Forum. One of the most useful benefits of the EPC is the ability to take advantage of advanced policy-based charging and control. So traditionally, policy has been dictated mainly by speed, but advanced policy architecture opens up a whole new dimension of applications and innovative billing arrangements. Some of the most common policy control use cases include fair use policies where subscribers' bandwidth is automatically reduced upon reaching a cap. Another use case is application-based policies, which allow for different tiers that can be created to accommodate for different market segments and usage behaviors. And we can see examples of these policy types illustrated here below. So, for example, some users might only want the ability to check work emails on their smartphones, while others require email, chat, and social networking. Your policy requirements should include a standards-based 3GPP policy and charging control infrastructure that is already integrated with your back office system. And it should be able to support advanced use cases, including real-time and multidimensional rating and charging, such as the two examples I've discussed, the per application charging and volume caps. Proven support for voice over LTE and roaming is also key, as these will be important business cases for LTE. On this slide, I wanted to discuss with you the importance of a robust and flexible integration framework when migrating to LTE from a legacy network. One major pitfall that we've seen in our experience is that when service providers do invest in a single box, one vendor solution, this does not allow for a flexible integration framework, and ultimately it can inhibit the evolution of your network. A strong yet flexible integration framework is something that we focus very highly on, since this allows you to create the optimal network that can quickly and cost-effectively evolve along with your business needs. So what is the ideal integration framework? Your framework should include a rich library of SOAP APIs, protocols, and open industry standards that enable complete integration with other network elements as well as back office systems, regardless of the vendor. And the main goal of an integration framework is to reduce the time and risk of integration, as well as to protect your investment and reduce your overall cost of ownership. So at this time, Mike is going to give us the results of the poll that we took.
Great, thanks, Angel. Yeah, the question again on the poll was at what stage of LTE migration is your company in? You can see that on the screen. Looks like 24% are already deployed. 10% will deploy in the next 12 months. 48%, however, are currently evaluating migrating to LTE, which is close to half, and 17% have no plans right now to deploy. So thanks again for participating in the poll. Angel?
Thanks for sharing that, Mike. So lastly, I would like to discuss a real-world example of LTE rollout in a fast-growing WiMAX service provider network. In this case study, we'll see how the LTE rollout successfully allowed the service provider to cope with market demand for faster and more diversified mobile data services, as well as achieve convergence between LTE and WiMAX technologies, while avoiding any sort of disruption with their existing WiMAX services. This case study describes SpectraNet, who is one of the fastest growing WiMAX service providers in Nigeria. SpectraNet provides internet and broadband services to individuals and businesses, and they started a nationwide LTE rollout with Alepo in the second quarter of this year. Alepo was chosen as a partner because of our long experience in B and OSS and our vendor-neutral standards-based solution. Some of the project goals are listed here. Those called for an end-to-end 4G broadband management solution that would support both WiMAX and LTE in one platform. Also key for SpectraNet were the scalability requirements, since they expected to have sustained growth in their subscriber base in the coming years. And since their product portfolio includes data, voice, video, and Wi-Fi, a central aspect was that the solution had to handle extreme flexibility in the offer design. And last but not least, the support for standards-based integration in a multi-vendor environment played an essential role to guarantee SpectraNet a best-of-breed vendor-neutral solution. In addition to providing the benefits of the EPC, such as advanced policy offerings and a dual stack platform, we were also able to bolster their customer management systems. And I wanted to highlight some of these. We offered advanced Web 2.0 and mobile apps for customer self-care and system management. They received real-time notifications and alerts to facilitate automatic interaction with their customers. We provided them with a comprehensive customer relationship management system and also device management for activation and troubleshooting. In this slide, we compiled a summary of the outcomes of the project. So SpectraNet now enjoys the use of WiMAX and LTE in a single solution with a dual stack platform. In addition, we successfully migrated all their existing data with no interruption or disturbance of their existing services. Alepo also successfully integrated various network elements and external systems with LTE. And ultimately, because of the scalability and flexibility of the network design, SpectraNet was able to gain a future-proof solution that supports its growth plan and can adapt to its changing business needs. So that's all I have. Thank you so much for participating in the webinar. If you are currently evaluating LTE, please do not hesitate to contact us. Alepo is able to offer our expertise in helping you determine the best course of action for your LTE rollout. And on a final note, we will be showcasing our EPC solution with Airspan in London next month, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. So please check out our webpage at alepo.com for more details. And I will hand it back to Mike now.
Thanks, Angel. Yes, we already have a lot of questions for all attendees. If you do want to ask a question, please use the GoToWebinar dashboard and ask through the system. Helping us today with the questions, again, is Ramiro Costa, Director of Key Accounts with Alepo. The first question we have is, what about cable operators? How and where does LTE make sense for them? Ramiro?
Hi, Mike, and thanks, Angel, for the presentation. So on cable operators, we have seen as an experience that cable operators are trying to go mobile, and certainly LTE is one of the options they have. And the main reason they are trying to do so is to basically to try to expand the service portfolio and bundle with the fixed services that they already offer, like internet or fixed voice or wireless LAN, IPTV, etc. So so in order to go mobile, they have few options. One that we have seen is that sometimes they make MVNO agreements with mobile operators. But the problem with this is that depending on the market conditions, the business case might not always work all that well. And the main reason is the bill with the mobile operator. So depending on different factors like funding or as I said, the market conditions, or even the size or the number of subscribers, they might choose to deploy LTE as an option to go mobile. Also, we have seen some operators also choose Wi-Fi as another option to go mobile. And the benefit of that is that it's easier for them. It's also easy for them to deploy Wi-Fi over the fixed network. So they have both options, basically LTE or even Wi-Fi. And in both cases, we do have solutions, and we can definitely help.
Great. Sounds like you do have a lot of flexibility there. The next question is a very important one. It's how can I retain my WiMAX investment while launching LTE? This is mainly for WiMAX network providers.
So I would say that the general recommendation would be to that when expanding the network, do it over LTE. So if you already are a WiMAX operator and you are launching LTE, the main usually what we see is that the operators expand any new region or any new area where they add coverage, they do so over LTE, and they keep also WiMAX basically as long as it makes business sense. And given that the competitive pressures are not so high. And the main reason for this is that overall the cost of maintaining WiMAX, including the devices and also the network and the complexity, is going to be a problem. So, and this is considering that the LTE costs, as we explained in the webinar, are going down, whereas the WiMAX costs are likely to go up. So, as I said, as long as it makes business sense, keep your network, your WiMAX network, and also try to expand on new regions using LTE.
Great, thank you. How long is a typical LTE deployment? That's the next question.
So I would say that for the Alepo part, which means the actual deployment, integration, and rollout and go live of the service, it should take around 6 to 8 months. That's a typical deployment what we have seen so far. And but the whole process and this is important for those operators that in the poll mentioned that they are evaluated now, from the whole process from conception, design to RFP, vendor selection and deployment, it takes anywhere between a year and 18 months based on our experience.
Okay, I understand. On the slide pertaining to RAN-related challenges, can you draw any conclusions for how to migrate existing customers based on any experiences from service providers that you've already crossed this issue?
So, I guess it depends on the particular situation. I would say that if there is enough spectrum available, enough spectrum resources available, probably the overlay is the best alternative. Basically, because it allows a smoother transition. You would basically have both networks available at the same time, and you can smoothly transition subscribers from WiMAX to LTE, and also let your subscribers choose WiMAX or LTE. And but if the spectrum is not available, or even if it's expensive to get, a swap might be the only alternative left. So in this case, what we have seen is that it's usually done in phases. Some operators start in different regions, take one region at a time, deploy LTE, and then do a swap region by region. But as it was mentioned by Angel, it requires more planning. So basically, all devices need to be shipped and configured and be on the customer premises on time before the swap. And also, as I said, the other option that we have seen is that usually when operator is launching, is rolling out LTE, they do so in areas where they don't have a WiMAX coverage first, and then they start doing other regions. And this is what one of our customers is doing, is the case of Spectranet that was mentioned on this webinar.
Great, thank you. One customer or one attendee had a question pertaining to EPC. It says, we are looking for an end-to-end solution for the EPC components you don't provide. How can we still work with you?
Well, this is a typical question that we get. We definitely can help and can handle this scenario. As we mentioned, we have all the EPC components, but of course there are a few components in the network that we don't provide.
Sure.
But for this, we have a large list of vendor partners, and we always foster and do interoperability tests and IoTs with these vendors from all the LTE space, IMS, DPI, or even the RAN vendors to ensure that our solution can interoperate with those vendors. So and this is something we always do on projects. We take a consultative approach, so we help our customers through the process, and not only with our components of the solution, but also help them on choosing and procuring the other items that are important for any LTE deployment. So I think we can definitely help to our customers to choose the right partners for each component.
Great, thank you, Romero. I think we have time for a few more questions. Here's one pertaining to WiMAX. It says, overall, despite the reduction in Clearwire, WiMAX is not yet declining. Do you think WiMAX is dead right now?
Well, this is a question we get all the time. It's really hard to say. I mean, we have seen some new applications, although some new applications for WiMAX have arisen lately, like especially for vertical markets, for example. We still believe that there will be a gradual process of WiMAX operators migrating to LTE. It would not happen, and this is and we saw this on the poll. It won't happen overnight, but it's going to be a process, and we think will take place, and ultimately WiMAX operators will be shifting to LTE. And the reason for this is, as we mentioned in the webinar, mainly the cost of maintaining the WiMAX network is likely to go up. We have seen many device vendors, many chipset vendors, like as was mentioned here, Qualcomm and Intel, that have shifted R&D investment from WiMAX to LTE, and it's expected that the pricing for devices for LTE will go down. And as we know, pricing and economies of scale are important to be able to get a sustained growth in the network. So all in all, WiMAX devices will be, LTE devices will be more and more available, and prices will go down, and the WiMAX devices are likely to follow the other direction. So it's in the long run, it's probably hurt the business case for keeping the WiMAX network and not migrating.
I see. Last question, Romero. What DPIs have you interoperated with your solution?
So as I mentioned, we have experience and interoperability with different vendors in the space. Specifically for DPI, we have proven IoT and real deployments experience with many vendors. I can mention Cisco or Sandvine, Allot, Verisys, Juniper, and among others. As I mentioned, we always focus on having interoperability and experience with different vendors, and this is really important for best-of-breed networks. We are always looking to increase our ecosystem of partners.
Great. Well, thanks again, Romero, for answering all these questions from our attendees. Okay, this will now conclude today's webinar. I would like to thank Angel again and Romero for providing us with such a great presentation. I'd also like to thank all the attendees for attending today's webinar and asking some really good questions. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded, and an email with the recording link will be sent to all attendees. I'd like to thank everyone for your time, and I hope everyone has a great day.